What's up, everybody? Happy summer. We are here July 18th. Only a few weeks left until the 2023 college football season. So we are back recording. We are the crew from the Locks of Saturday. My name is Sam Jesse. I'm joined by Brett Smith and the producer / content creator, Dom Bolts. Dom, welcome back to the United States. You were gone for a bit there.
Yeah, glad to be back. Study abroad it was a great time, but time to get back into some good bets.
And Brett, you're looking like you're having a good time in Moscow, Idaho right now.
Yeah, I'm in the not a house, a home, the good old Kibby Dome. So can't beat it.
Well, I'm right here on the shores in Seattle
Puget Sound.
with the Huskies jersey on. So you can probably guess what we're talking about tonight. Tonight is the Pac-12 preview. So we are going to preview each Power 5 conference. We're going to do our games of the season, our dark horse teams, our bust teams, and our champion for each Power 5 conference, as well as just some freestyle bets of what we like, win totals, teams that we're liking their overs this year, teams that we're liking their unders, just some little tidbits here and there to help your bets this season. We'll be doing this for all 5 Power 5 conferences again. And then we got week 0 and some more national big picture stuff. And then it's week 1. Guys, it is coming quickly. August 26th will be the first Saturday of college football. Kickoff will be in Ireland between Navy and Notre Dame. But before we get to that, we have some Pac-12 football to talk about. And hey, if you Pac-12 football TV deal, they don't really know what they're doing right now. So take advantage of nationally televised Pac-12 football this year. Stay up late, watch some Pac-12 after dark, and have some skin in the game. And look, if you're not in a state that has legalized sports betting, you just like talk about it, that is okay. All my friends here in North Carolina, we got about 6 months left. Before that, though, Brett, there's a pretty cool daily fantasy site that they can use to have some skin in the game. Prize Picks.
Yeah, Prize Picks is awesome. I mean, I definitely, especially last football season and basketball season, it was really cool and how they have, you're able to put like a bunch of, I guess you would say, picks together, and you only have to hit like 3 out of 5 and then you can cash in. I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's a good way, and it's all like prop based bets, so it's a lot of fun in that way. So it's like, I sometimes like doing picks on individual players more than the actual game itself, because the outcome is a lot less stressful than the outcome, but sometimes it's more stressful, but it's a lot more fun. Like this weekend into the U.S. is the Open Championship in Royal Liverpool, which is one of the most prestigious places in the world to be playing golf. And a couple picks I have going right now is what's stroke count. Ricky Fowler under 69.5 strokes, Tommy Fleetwood under 70 strokes. I think those are 2 really good picks right now, and I think you can add a couple more in there. But Ricky's on fire right now. Tommy Fleetwood is playing good golf this year, back in his home. I think it's going to be a good weekend.
Grab Rory and McIlroy top 5 while you can.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Ricky Fowler, he's got to win it this summer. Like if it's going to happen, it's going to happen at Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, last time Rory played her, he won a major, and he's 9 years since he's won. That was the last one he won. Crazy.
It's actually crazy. He's been that big of a star in golf for that long.
It's
been 9 years since his last one.
He's either tied with Tiger or won back from Tiger in top 5 finishes at majors, and he has half as many majors as Tiger. That just tells you how close he is.
Well, on Prize Picks, you can play daily fantasy with everything from women's college basketball to the PGA Tour. And it'll be great for college football this season. The guy who'll be playing on the field behind me, Michael Penix, will have some pretty daunting numbers to cover. But we're going to talk about that. We'll get into it. Guys, if you also want some more Locks of Saturday content, we're going to be firing up the Twitter machine again. We also have a TikTok page that we've started at Locks of Saturday with a lot of cool stuff there. Some 2 to 3 minute videos on some win totals that we have, as well as more Prize Pick stuff. We'll have a ton of content on TikTok as well this season. All right, guys, let's just get into it right now. Game of the season in the Pac-12. I think, Brett, I know you agree with me. We'll see what Dom thinks. This is the most interesting conference in the country by a mile.
It's wide open.
Yeah, and it's not even. This is the best Pac-12 as a whole. Well, probably maybe not as a whole, but probably the top half of Pac-12 they've had since, I'd argue, probably the Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush era. That's how good this conference is this year. I don't know, or maybe early 2010s like Oregon, like that dominance. They haven't had this much top to bottom talent in the conference in a long time.
There's legitimately 6 teams you could make an argument for not only to make the championship game in Vegas, but to win the Pac-12 championship.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we haven't seen in the college football playoff era. I don't know if we've seen a conference that is this wide open with so many good teams. It's not like it's wide open with the ACC teams. It's wide open with top 25 teams.
And there's 4 teams on here that could definitely 4 teams that could make the college football playoff this year, not just win their conference.
Yeah. I'm gonna say it right now. I did my win-loss for the Pac-12 going through each game. I ended up with a 4-way tie for first for the second consecutive year.
Yeah. It's possible. I mean, no doubt about it. It's possible.
All right, so let's get into it, guys. Our game of the season. For the game of the season segment, we are going to look at a game that will impact the conference the most. Maybe not the best game, maybe not the highest ranked, but the game that will impact the conference race the most. Now, remember this. We're thinking about this through a betting lens, so we'll talk about the lines, prices, and everything throughout the show. So, game that will impact the conference the most. Dom, go ahead and start, buddy.
Mine's a little unconventional, I'd say. I went with something that maybe not a lot of people are looking at, but I like Oregon at Washington week 6 as my game of the year because I think that both teams could most likely come in undefeated at 5-0. And I like both teams to be able to contend to make it the championship and possibly win this year. So I think that whatever team wins, it could kickstart the back half of their season, give them a good shot at making a real run at the thing. I expect a lot from Washington this year, and I expect a lot from this game. I expect it to be very exciting. So that'll be my game of the year.
Both teams will be coming off of a bye for that game as well, and the game will be on the field right behind me in Seattle. Brett.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good games, I'd say, in this conference this year, especially the back half of the year. I mean, looking just at USC, they play, this is out of conference, but they play at Notre Dame, Utah, and they play at California. Then they play Washington, Oregon, UCLA to close out. I mean, those, you could argue USC has the 5 out of their last 6 games or game of the seasons, or their most important games. I mean, it's going to be a gauntlet for them to get through. So that being said, I think that I have to go with probably Utah at USC on October 21st. I think that's including the conference. If USC gets through Notre Dame, which I think they will because they have questions of QB, and USC's defense is much better this year. I think that actually piggybacks off Dom's pick a little bit, especially if Utah wins that game against Washington. I think that's going to be the game that is a major deciding factor for the conference.
Yeah, and I think with USC this season, they have a pretty tough schedule. So they play the week 0 game. They'll play against San Jose State on August 26th. And then they'll play Nevada and they'll play Stanford. They should handle those pretty easily. Then they have a bye week. And then they play every week for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
So they'll play 9 straight weekends. That's really, really tough. We'll talk about that a little bit later on, but really weird. Like the last week of the season, they get a bye week. So they'll have an extra week potentially going into the championship game, but 9 straight games is a lot for a college football team.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And they, like I said, they have a gauntlet to run through, pretty much more than any other of these teams that are playing the Pac-12 this year. I think Oregon's probably got they have a pretty tough stretch too. They play Washington State, Utah, California, USC in a stretch, and then they play at Arizona State. And obviously they end at Oregon State, which what team we'll talk about later. But they have a tough stretch. Washington also plays, I think it was 7 straight games. So they, no doubt about it, there's going to be it's going to get real messy real fast in the Pac-12, but it's going to be awesome.
It's going to be awesome. And we don't have to wait long to talk about Oregon State. They are in my game of the season. Last week of the season, Black Friday, Oregon State at Oregon in Eugene. Used to be called the Civil War. I don't know what they call it now. The Battle of the Pond, I think, is my favorite between the Ducks and the Beavers. I think this is one of the most underrated rivalries in terms of hatred in American college sports. And I also just think this is a great spot for this game. Two teams are going to be really good, should have good quarterback play. They both have good young coaches. I love this rivalry this year. This might be the game I'm most excited for in the college football season. And I think it will go a long ways in determining the Pac 12 title race, which we'll talk about in a sec. Oregon State, DJ Uyunglele is in Corvallis, all the way from Clemson, South Carolina. Oregon State's offense needs to take a step forward. It should take a step forward. Their defense was tops in the Pac 12 last year. It'll take a little step back, but I think the offense will be enough to carry them forward to another really good season. And Oregon's just crazy talented. Bo Nix is finally playing to his potential. I think Oregon's going to be a really good team. Both of them have tough schedules down the stretch. Oregon State ends with Washington at home and then Oregon. That's a really tough last two games. But other than that, Oregon State's schedule is maybe the most manageable of anybody in the Pac-12. So I look at that game and I say that might not, it might not be the Iron Bowl. It might not be Texas, Oklahoma. It might not be Florida State, Miami, but that might be the most important rivalry game of the college football season this year.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's a shame that's not in Oregon State because it would be like way more, Billy Ray would say, gritty because it's going to be in like it would have been a half a stadium, which would have been hilarious.
No, it'll be open.
Oh, it'll be open by then?
Yes. They will have it. I believe they'll have it open.
Okay. Well, even that would have been even better. But it's a standalone Friday night game, but probably because it's going to be late and it's going to be a night game, probably or a late evening game there or early evening. So that'll be a standalone night game for the East Coasters for sure.
I hope they play the highlighter yellow versus all orange again. That was maybe my favorite college football game to watch of all time.
That's a tough watch right there.
It's a great watch. You love it, Dom. You love it.
It's a
great uniform matchup, regardless of what they choose. All right, those are our games. There are some other really important games out of conference. Obviously, we'll talk about Colorado. Colorado gets to play their two biggest rivals at home in back-to-back weeks. They'll play Nebraska and then Colorado State. Really crazy that I don't know of a team who's ever had their two biggest rivals at home in back-to-back weekends. That's crazy.
Yeah, that is definitely pretty wild.
The
Nebraska
Sanders effect.
Yeah, we're not talking about the Big Ten this week, but Nebraska. Who knows what's going to happen with them this year?
Who knows? Also out of conference, we talked about USC will travel to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, one of the best home field teams in the country. That'll be a tough one for Caleb Williams and company. Utah, with revenge on their mind, they will host Florida. Washington, BYU is a fun game. Washington, Boise State is a fun game, but they should handle that one. Also looking around, Arizona plays Mississippi State. Arizona State plays Oklahoma State. Cal plays Auburn. So some good non-conference action here. UCLA plays what could have been so close to being their fellow Pac-12 team, San Diego State. That'll be an interesting one. They will play at San Diego State in week 2. So that's another interesting out-of-conference game. All right. Dark horse teams. In a conference full of top-end talent and the best player in college football by a mile, Caleb Williams, who is the dark horse team, Dom? Who do the people need to be looking out for?
Well, I think it's a little more obvious than I'd like to say, but I think it's the team you're rocking over there, Washington. I mean, I love Michael Penix Jr. I think everyone's going to be watching him this year. And I think their wide receiver, Jalen McMillan, is very talented. I mean, they won 11 games last year. They went over pretty easily in their win total. I think Penix is seen by many as a Heisman candidate. He'll have a lot to prove this year. I think they'll have a lot of offense, but their defense has a lot of returners that could make it tough for other teams if they can keep a potent offense. I think they make a great dark horse team for your bettors if you're looking for a team that is kind of towards the top, but not exactly the favorite.
Washington's win total is set at 9.5 this season, plus 125 on the over. That's on DraftKings.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's a good over value for a team that has one of the better quarterbacks in the nation, a couple NFL wide receivers, and you should get some progression on defense. Well, we'll see, but
I like them to start with 6 straight wins. I think they beat Oregon in my game of the year after going 5-0. So, I mean, there's 6 right there in my eyes.
I have them going 4-0. I actually maybe my biggest upset of the year, but there's one every year. They travel down to the desert to play Arizona. I think that's a scary game. They lost at Arizona State last season. Arizona, really good offense. That's a long trip. I have them dropping that game to Arizona and then winning all the way until they play Utah and Oregon State. I have them losing those two before winning the Apple Cup. So I have them right at 9-3. I could definitely see them either taking one of those games against Oregon State or Utah or avoiding the upset against Arizona. So if you're going to bet the over, I think you're definitely getting your money's worth with plus 125.
I think it's just an exciting team to bet on this year. I like them to have a lot of good games, close games, especially those 3 that you just talked about.
Yeah, they kind of have a bit of the UNC factor, like absolutely zero defense, but an insanely fun offense. I never want to trust UNC, but it's like when I see it from afar and it's different colors, they're really tempting. I like this Washington team. I don't know if the schedule sets up to be a 10-win team. I mean, they got to play USC, Utah, and Oregon State, and then a rivalry game against Washington State. That's a tough last 4. Then you throw in an Oregon team. You also have to travel to play Sparty and Michigan State. Michigan State will suck this year, but it's still a long trip.
Mm-hmm.
Tough for Washington, but I like it. I think it's worth the value.
I don't care what the over is in Washington, USC. Take it. I don't care if it's 85, 90. Take it. The highest scoring game of the year. I guarantee it.
You could maybe say just take that for every Washington game.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Is that the system play this year? Washington overs?
Consistent.
Big 10 might be. Big 10 unders. We'll see when we get to them. We'll see if that's the system play this year. Last year, Big 10 unders, at least the ones I bet, I think they hit like 68% or something crazy.
Washington is plus 320 to win the Pac-12 championship on DraftKings. Third shortest odds. Not the biggest dark horse betting wise, but I think when you talk about how crowded this conference is, really naming anybody but USC and Caleb Williams to win it would be a dark horse. Brett, who you got?
I'm going to go with actually the Utah Utes. I think it's I think the value's there plus 500 depending on where you're looking. Yeah, see, I think this is the team that is going to that people aren't quite talking about a ton because they're thinking Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., and Bo Nix. What people are forgetting about is a guy named Cameron Rising, who is the definition of a dog. I mean, that guy wants to win football games. He knows how to lead his team. When you have a dog at quarterback and you have Kyle Whittingham at the helm as the coach, it's pretty lethal combo because there's one thing you can always guarantee with Utah with Kyle Whittingham is that their defense is going to be stout, one of the toughest teams in the country. They throttled Oregon twice last year. They just demolished them. And it wasn't even close. And I think when I talk about my game of the year with them, we're playing at USC. I think that is going to be a defining win for the season, and I think it could definitely be even more so a program-defining win for them in terms of their national exposure. Last year, I had not realized, so I went back and looked. They were actually preseason number 7 last year, and they were close to a playoff last year. I mean, very, very close. They could have hit a playoff last year. And this team really did not lose a ton of players. They lost running back, but they have Jaquindon Jackson, who has been electric, and he's going to be a stud for them. Obviously, talking about Cameron Rising, their defensive line, they returned 7 of 8 players on the defensive line. And they have put countless players in the NFL. There's one thing for sure, the Pac-12 isn't known for the trenches and really like dogfight football. That's what Kyle Whittingham has made a success on. And when you return 7 of your 8 defensive linemen, that's something to be said. And I think that's a reason that they're really going to be strong this year. So I think
Cam Rising is just a huge football guy. Tough to hate on
Huge
that guy.
football guy.
Yeah.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean,
Cam Rising would die on a football field.
Yeah, he almost got killed against Penn State last. I mean, I thought he was dead. He got absolutely murdered. Like he was just like, I'm good. I mean, I was like, he's dead. There's no way he's. When he, I think who hit it? Was it? I can't remember who it was. But I thought people thought he was dead on the field, but he just got back up and he went back in. So I mean, he's. I think he's a dark horse, depending on how the season goes for a potential Heisman too. I mean, back-to-back Heisman's not happening for Caleb Williams. That just doesn't happen anymore just because people get bored and it's the new age. People get bored. They want something different. So, I mean, Michael Penix Jr. definitely is also on that list, but I think Cam Rising is going to be the catalyst for this team, and I think he's going to really surprise some people along with this team.
Our buddy Chris Hirons will enjoy this, but Action Network's TARP metric, transferring assets and returning production. Return production, it means a lot. It doesn't mean everything. It needs to be taken into context. But what something like TARP does a really good job at is notifying you to teams that should be getting a lot more hype than they are. Last year, two of the top in TARP were Kansas State and TCU. Probably should have paid attention to those teams last season. Utah is 10th in TARP this year. 10th. The team I am rocking, though, Washington, is number 1. Yeah. Highest amount of transferring assets and returning production. But Utah is 10th in that. And you combine that with how good they were last year, how dominant they are at home. They are the number 1 home field advantage in college football. Statistically, Utah is the toughest place to play in the sport. I think you can make an argument for Utah being a top 10 team this year, a top 5 team this year. I do, however, worry about their schedule.
It's a tough run on the back half. And plus they play well all overall, really.
So you got to go on the road to Baylor. And
they play Florida at home, but they should have beat Florida last year. I don't know what happened.
Yeah. You got to play UCLA in there. We'll talk about the Bruins. They play at Oregon State. They play at USC. They play at Washington. They'll host Oregon. They get a pretty tough schedule. I actually think they have, according to ESPN's FPI, I believe they have one of the toughest schedules in the Pac-12, maybe the toughest overall.
Yeah, but you just named that. It's a gauntlet right there.
I mean, it's a gauntlet, and I really like this Utah team. They're going to have issues with the pass defense this season. That scares me against Caleb Williams. If Caleb Williams stays healthy, which I think is another thing we'll talk about later, that's just a really – Caleb Williams and then Bo Nix is a really tough back-to-back combination for a pass defense that might be like average.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you. I think that their secondary and they're kind of like nickel packages from my understanding and won't be as good this year because they've lost a lot in the secondary. But again, if they can't get the ball out, it doesn't matter. Returning 7 defensive linemen is kind of where I stand for that. So
I'm all over 8.5 at plus 120.
Yeah, that's more so where I'm at.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best bang for your buck odds in terms of futures for the conference, just because I think they have the best, because Oregon's shorter odds, Washington's way shorter odds, and then obviously USC's the favorite, and they're like at plus 170 something. So
yeah, you can get Utah plus 600. I think that in itself is a good bet considering how crowded this conference is going to be. Getting any one of the teams that's going to be in the pack at plus 600, I think is a really good bet. And again, over 8.5. We'll be making a TikTok about that one on the Locks of Saturday TikTok channel, because that is that's a bona fide lock.
Yeah, I don't see them losing 4 games, even in that schedule.
Yeah. My dark horse team is one of my favorite teams this year. I talked about it a little bit last segment. Oregon State. Oregon State won 10 football games last year, and no one talked about it. They only had half a stadium, and they won 10 games.
Because it's Oregon State.
Because it's Oregon State. They're awesome because people aren't dedicated to the grind like I am. That's it. They're just not staying up late watching Oregon State football. Jonathan Davis, I think he's done one of the best jobs at building a program of anybody in the country. They recruit to their system. They have NFL talent on that team. They have 3 straight NFL drafts that Oregon State has had a tight end drafted in. That's pretty crazy. DJ Uyunglele, again, transferring in. If he can play up to his talent, he's going to be the best quarterback that they've had probably since Davis was a quarterback there. They have really good running back talent. They have a good defensive line, good linebackers, good safeties. They kind of lack an edge rusher a bit, which scares me. But the thing that I'm most excited about with Oregon State is their schedule. They have one of the most favorable schedules you could draw up in this conference, which is a gauntlet. Their non-conference, they should handle. They have San Jose State I think that's UC Davis, if I'm reading that logo correctly, and then San Diego State. They avoid USC. That's a W. That's a massive W. And if we look at the, kind of the back half after their bye week, they have Arizona, Colorado, Stanford back to back to back weeks. So it should be a little bit of rest time for Oregon State as well. I really like this team. They get Utah at home, they get Washington at home, they get UCLA at home. I think they have a very good strategic bye week. Getting that bye week before the really long trip down to Arizona, I think is going to be really key for Oregon State. And I think this team is just really, really good. I don't think last year was a blip on the radar. I think they could be another 10-win team this year.
I don't know if I'm sold on DJ. I saw him make too many questionable decisions in the ACC, and I think he's actually taking a step up in competition now, going to this like loaded Pac-12. So I'm excited to see how he does, but I don't know if I'm completely sold yet.
I think he definitely has to get back to where he was when he filled in for Trevor Lawrence.
I think there'll be a lot less pressure on him now.
Yeah, and the system will be much more, quarterback friendly, right? That Clemson system is, you kind of need a 5-star quarterback, and I don't think he needs to be a 5-star quarterback. This was a 10-win team with poor quarterback play last year. If they get good quarterback play, there's no reason to expect they won't be another 10-win team.
He needs to be
Yeah,
more
I mean,
Go ahead.
Yeah, the AJ made questionable decisions. I think he may have, like Sam said, been a victim of the system because, Clemson went out and hired probably the hottest name on the market in terms of offensive coordinators last year. So, I would have been interested to see if he could do anything with Chris. But, yeah, I think I kind of agree with Sam. I think a good quarterback play can really change this team considering they pretty much bring most of their talent back and had 10 wins.
Yeah, more than anything, he just needs to be a good game manager, and they can get 10 wins easy, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think they'll have some really cool games. They'll play 2 Friday games this year, so they'll be on national TV, which I think will be really good for that program. And again, I think they have a pretty favorable schedule. The road games they drew in the Pac-12 were Washington State, Cal, Arizona, Colorado, and then the game against Oregon. So if those are the road games you're drawing in this conference, I think you're feeling pretty good about yourself.
Yeah,
all right. We've talked about some teams that are going to do pretty well. How about some teams that are going to do pretty bad? Because anytime you have a lot of good teams in a conference, you got a lot of bad teams in the conference. Brett, I know who you're going to talk about, so I'll go to Dom first. Dom, who is the bust team of the year in the Pac-12?
I think with all these teams sitting at 8 or 9 win total for the year, one of them is going to underperform. And I think that one will be UCLA. I think that UCLA is dealing with a lot of questions this year. Who's going to start at QB? They have Dante Moore coming in. I think he'll take over the reins at some point. There's a lot of excitement around him, a lot of hype. I think they have a lot to figure out. I don't think they're going to contend on the level of USC, Washington, Oregon, Utah this year. And I think they will start out 0-1 away at Utah. It's going to be a really tough game. And starting the season like that, it's only going to make the confidence worse, make the questions even bigger. I don't have much faith in the Bruins to go over 8.5 wins. I like them at about 8, if not 7 wins this year.
Well, if you want to hear me talk about how good the Bruins can be this year, head over to our TikTok page. I just posted that yesterday.
Blocks of Saturday. Throw us a follow.
No, I think UCLA has been I flipped on UCLA very recently. And the reason being was because I think their schedule, again, 5 of their last 6 games are against so they'll go Stanford, Colorado, Arizona State. Then they play at USC, and then they finish at home against Cal. So I think 5 of their last 6 games are against the 5 bottom teams in the conference. And then you consider that they have North Carolina Central. They have Coastal Carolina, who is a little scary, but they should handle that. And then they have San Diego State, who they should simply outscore. That gives me 8 wins. I only need 1 more to hit the over. That was my thought process on the over. But then again, they're replacing the NCAA leader in total yardage. They're replacing the best quarterback in school history. They're replacing an NFL wide receiver in Jake Bobo. Their defense was mediocre at best, kind of bad last year.
I agree with all those things. I think that
That's a lot to replace. I understand that.
all those things make up for. I see them getting upset possibly in some of those games you talked about unexpectedly.
Brett,
Yeah.
any thoughts on the Bruins?
Yeah, I was getting ready to chime in. I mean, bringing in Carson Steele was huge for them. I mean, no doubt. I mean, he was that. I think they're definitely probably the team I'm going to stay away from because I don't know what's going to happen. Just because they could, hit the win total. I mean, avoiding Oregon and Washington is, I think the only team that does that, if I'm not mistaken, that's in the top. That I would argue that's in that top half. That's avoiding 2 of probably the top 5 teams. So that's that's a step, definitely a big way for. That's probably why their win total is at 8.5 is because of that. If you switch out, say Stanford, or somebody, that's not going. The win total's not going to be the same. That's obvious, but that's where I'm at. I mean, 9-4 last year, with DTR, Jake Bobo, and those guys. Definitely going to miss them, but it's going to come down to, like Dom said. I mean, Dante Moore. I mean, true redshirt freshman coming in, taking the reins over already. But he's, like I said, he's got somebody to lean on in Carson Steele, who is probably he kind of flew under the radar on the transfer portal a little bit, but then all of a sudden it's like every team wanted him, and he was like, "I'm going to go spend my year in Southern California after I just spent it in the middle of Ohio." So can't really put him there.
That's
Indiana.
He's been having too
much all season in Indiana. That's right.
Insane difference, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the MAC. Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
He'll be sitting at the beach too much, not focused on football.
He's got the hair for it. I'll give him that. He's this long, blonde, surfer-looking dude. He's going to be on UCLA, so can't really.
In all seriousness, he's very fun to watch. He is a really you're going to enjoy watching Carson Steele run the football. It's very fun.
Yeah.
So my bus team is a little bit out there. This isn't a team expected to be very good, but the reason I'm picking them as my bus team is because their win total is set at 5, and I don't think they're going to touch 5. I'm going to look for some quotes here really quick. We're going to have to talk about Colorado, right? We're going to have to talk about them. We will. But I just wanted to talk about kind of the differences in how certain coaches approach rebuilds, because this is a rebuild, right? I mean, Arizona State is down bad as a program. Ton of guys transferring out. They haven't recruited well at all the past couple years. So they bring on an alum. They bring on Kenny Dillingham. He's got a lot of work to do in the desert. So here's what Kenny Dillingham said. This is in the Lindy's magazine, one of my favorite preseason magazines. This is what he said in regards to recruiting the state of Arizona and getting the brand and the program back to where they need to be, which something I know we have a lot of Virginia Tech listeners. Brent Pry has been asked this question a whole lot, and his answer is very similar to Brent Pry. Kenny Dillingham said, quote, "Anybody that thinks it's going to flip overnight is very short-sighted. This is a process." That rings a lot like what Brent Pry said last year before Virginia Tech went 3-8 with a much, much easier schedule.
Mm-hmm. Shout out Brent Pry. Recruiting trail's going crazy right now.
Yeah, shout out Brent Pry. We'll talk about them much later on in a few weeks. But yeah, I mean, this Arizona State team, their non-conference is tough. They'll play like Southern Utah or someone, and then they have Oklahoma State and Fresno State. They get those teams at home, but I think those are just flat out more talented teams. Then they play USC. Cal is not a terrible team. I think Cal's a very 6-6 team. Washington State's probably a more talented team. Utah is going to beat the crap out of them. UCLA is a much more talented team. Oregon's going to beat the crap out of them. And then they have Arizona in that rivalry game to end it. And that Arizona team can score a lot of points. Look, this is a team that lost to Eastern Michigan last year. They're not very talented. They brought in a lot of transfers, but not a lot of cohesion in the guys they brought in. They're a ways away. I think you're going to see what you saw at Virginia Tech last season, where you have a team that really just needs to completely hit the reset button. Unfortunately, 6 months is not enough time to get them back to a competitive I have the Sun Devils going 3-9 this year, finishing 10th in the conference. So they're better than someone. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough year in the desert. But I wanted to give you that quote and give you that. And then let's flip over a couple pages and let's talk about what Deion Sanders said. Here's Deion Sanders' quote when asked literally the same question just for Colorado. This process is going to be fast. It's going to be quick, but we're going to get it done. I love every darn minute of it. You could not have two coaches approaching a rebuild more differently than Deion Sanders and Kenny Dillingham. And that's just straight up hilarious.
I mean, do you expect anything else from Deion?
Yeah,
He just wants to win. He's a winner.
No, and I mean, first off, I love it because I love the entertainment and the drama of Deion Sanders. But dude is in for a rude awakening. Did he see that team? Like, Colorado didn't just lose their bad players. Colorado lost their players that were actually good last year too.
Yeah.
Hey, he said he was bringing his bag with him.
We're gonna go ahead and kick off with them because they're my bus team. So I can go ahead and start if you guys are ready for this.
I mean, I feel like I gave you a good lead into that.
Yeah, I mean, so look, I think Deion, I think what he did at Jackson State was unbelievable, and I think the culture he built there, I think it's really, really, I think it was really special, and it was definitely something that college football as a whole needed, especially with the HBCUs and stuff. I think that was really cool what he was able to do for sure. But that being said, I thought Colorado was the weirdest job for him to take. I didn't really get that. I mean, Boulder's a great town and city, so I guess it's not that hard to recruit there. But being in the Pac-12, knowing going into the Pac-12 is dying and Colorado is for sure going to be left behind, thought that was a really weird job for him to take. And anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But yeah, Colorado lost a lot of their good players. I think this team is no doubt a total rebuild. And, he said he brought his Louis Vuitton luggage or whatever. I mean, he brought in, obviously, his son, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, who's a great player, and they claim he's going to be playing both sides of the ball. I think Travis Hunter is amazing. There's no way you're playing to both sides of the ball at Power 5. Well, FBS football.
Tough. That's
not happening. Even your best players that, nobody's doing that. If you care about your career and your NFL aspirations, you're not going to be doing that. And so they're saying he's going to make a difference on both sides of the ball. I don't see it. They did get Cormani McLean from, last minute, flipped from Miami, who was top 5 recruit last year playing defensive back. Still, you don't see many true freshman defensive backs playing. But, Mansour Delane's a good example last year for Virginia Tech, played really well at true freshman. But again, that does not happen very often, especially in a conference that's going to throw the ball more than anywhere else. So there's too many question marks here. Shedeur Sanders, I think he's a good player, but going from just dunking on players in FCS and in their conference to going to the Pac-12 when the Pac-12 is the best it's ever been, I have a hard time seeing this team win more than like a few games. Their season total is at 3.5. I think I'm going definitely on the bust, even though it's not really a bust because they're not projected to be that great. But their bust is I'm projecting to win 3 games. Their out of conference is tough. They open up with at TCU, Nebraska, and Colorado State. Colorado State is definitely fiending to beat Deion Sanders, no doubt about it, even though it's at home. Nebraska is the definition of a frisky team with I think a good college coach. Matt Rule is not good in the NFL. We know that. I think he knows that. I think he realized that. But he's a great college coach, offensive guru, and I think that's a frisky team to play. And then they play at Oregon, USC, at Oregon State, Stanford at home, at UCLA, Oregon State at home, Arizona, Washington State, Utah. The only team they really avoid is Washington, and that's it. Other than that, they're playing just as tough as – they're probably playing the toughest schedule in the Pac-12.
I believe they are because they're basically replacing Washington with TCU.
Yeah, and then instead of playing like most Pac-12 teams, like playing UC Davis, they're playing Nebraska.
Yeah,
and I applaud Deion. He's trying to get national exposure to this program early, which is his way of recruiting, and I think it's definitely that's a big risk to take. And I think if they do succeed, that's going to pay crazy dividends for them. But I think year one, I think it's a little ambitious. Even though it probably wasn't his choice to schedule these teams, but obviously he's going to play it up like, oh, we're not going to back down or whatever. Look, I think if they do succeed, I'll be like, I won't be that surprised if they somehow, flip it on. Like, Dion does something have about him, but I just don't see it with the roster they have and the shock that's going to come to all this baggage he claimed he brought from going from FCS to really not great FCS play. And they're not playing like the good FCS programs day in and day out.
Yeah. It's almost like
it's like
double A. It's like the second division of FCS. Like you're not playing North Dakota State, you're not playing South Dakota State, you're not playing Sacramento State. Like you're not playing the teams that are winning. You're not playing the Montana schools. Like,
yeah, so it's going to be I think it's going to be a big shock for some of these guys, especially TCU off the get. But who knows? He's a frisky guy. You don't know what's going to happen. But that's all I got with them.
Say something nice about Colorado. I think they will win one of their rivalry games at home. They'll beat either Nebraska or Colorado State. And I have them beating Stanford at home on a Friday night. And that's it. I'm going 2-10.
I think
say something nice about Colorado. Ralphie the Buffalo is awesome.
Bucket list item just to see him. I don't even care about the game at that point.
And also the video with him and with Dion going to meet him, he was scared. That was like the greatest video I've watched.
It is a fun fact. It's a female buffalo.
Yeah.
Ralphie's a girl. They tried to use a male buffalo, didn't end well.
Yeah, I can
so
understand.
They went to a female buffalo. Yeah.
Also, Arizona State. We'll go back to them real quick. I just remembered Drew Pine. Obviously transferred kind of out of nowhere from Arizona State. Might not be the starter end of the year because they have a guy named Jaden Rashada as a true freshman that came in that had committed to like 6 places, notably Miami first, and then he committed to Florida. Yeah, Florida and they said he had a $13 million NIL deal that he withdrew from last minute. I think he got a release letter, and then he just kind of fell into Arizona State's lap because his dad played there.
Tate Martell vibes.
Yeah, kind of. Just saying. Drew Pine might not be the starter by the end of the year if things go south.
With Colorado, I think that Dion just coming in with like so much attitude and confidence, just too much, because they're going to come in and get smacked in the mouth. I think everyone can see it at this point. Yeah. And they're going to have like so much pressure and social media attention on them. I think they're going to get roasted online. Like Dion's going to be getting roasted all year long because he's saying like, oh, I brought my Louis. And he's like showing off his cool locker room and everything, all these upgrades he's making. And they're going to win 3 games. And then what?
And what's crazy is like, I like Dion and like, I want him to succeed at Colorado. Awesome. Like, I think that would be awesome, but I just like, it's not going to happen this year. Like this team is bad. Like they are bad.
1-11.
If they won a lot of games, I'd be happy about it. Like that'd be a great storyline, but it's just not reasonable. It's just not.
Yeah, I mean,
and like especially in this year's Pac-12, give me like Pac-12 like 6 years ago, maybe, but this year's Pac-12, no, not a chance.
Any other program that is bringing in an FCS transfer quarterback and a completely new offensive line and brought no defensive linemen in from the transfer portal on a team that couldn't stop the run, we would be saying they'd be the last place team in college football.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very good way to put it.
They could not make a bowl game with 5 wins and still have it be a huge success. So that's the good
if they win 5 games, he's coaching somewhere else in next year.
Yeah. And bringing his bags with him. He's going
bringing his bags with. All right. Well, that's enough talk about Colorado, although I think they are just an incredibly interesting team.
They're an enigma of a team.
Yes. Fellas, who's winning the Pac-12 this year? Who is the champion? There's one team that we haven't talked a lot about.
Oregon.
No, we've talked a little bit about Oregon.
Well,
Tom, who's your champion?
I guess the major one we haven't talked about at all.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm going with the obvious one for one of my picks. I'm going to take one obvious pick. So I'm going USC. I think that, Caleb Williams, he's going to be firing all season. Him and Lincoln Riley just seem to have a really good chemistry, and he knows like how to play call for him. I think the offense is going to be the best in the conference this season. The defense is always a little shaky. That's why we love our USC overs, though. Just to hit it every game, and I'm sure you'll be plus money by the end of the year. They always seem to be in those like high scoring shootout games, late night, prime time. I think they go over 10 wins, likely like a top 10 team at the end of the year, needing a win in the Pac-12 championship to possibly get them a spot in the college football playoff. They have 2 new wide receivers that I like. Dorian Singer, transfer from Arizona. I like him a lot. And then they have that true freshman who could make a little bit of impact, Zachariah Branch. The defense should be the only question mark, but I see a lot of high scoring games that they'll be prepared for with that offense. I think watch for the game at home against Utah. They have lost to Utah. They lost twice to Utah last year. It's kind of their kryptonite in a way. But I think they have them in Cali, and that will decide their fate in the college football playoff rankings, I think, is that game against Utah.
I have USC as well. I think like Caleb Williams, he gets the comparison to Patrick Mahomes. Maybe a little unfair this early, but you can see the resemblance in the way that they play.
That's like a shot
And
getting compared to Mahomes.
I'm not betting against Caleb Williams. Like what I saw last year was one of the best college quarterbacks I've ever seen. I'm not betting against him. The defense will be more talented. Whether they're better or not, I'm not sure, but the defense should be more talented. I think
Caleb needs to stop. The only thing I don't like that could make things tough, he needs to stop painting his damn nails, saying F every team. If you're painting your nails, it says F this team, F that team. They're gonna come in wanting to like kick your butt every time. You're just giving them too much motivation.
Yeah, that's a questionable move. I love it. Like I love it externally, but if I was his teammate, I'd be like, "Hey, Caleb, those guys already want to hit us really."
You're like the offensive lineman. Like, maybe don't do that when I have to go bang heads of this guy for all game. Maybe let's like not make them mad.
Yeah, I think USC's schedule sets up so that they can kind of coast into the hard part of the schedule, if that makes sense. I mean, they'll start 3-0 pretty easy. Then they'll have a bye. Then they'll play Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona. Those are another 3 easy wins before they travel to Notre Dame. Then it gets tough, right? They have Notre Dame, then they have Utah, road game at Cal. They host Washington, at Oregon, and then they host UCLA. That's a gauntlet last little bit. I am a little worried about Caleb Williams' health. We have not seen him stay healthy. And with all of those games in a row, again, 9 games in a row, I don't see this team staying healthy enough. And I don't see the defense showing up every week. They're going to show up some weeks and play better, but not every week. I think you might have an instance where they get a little injured and they play too many good opponents in a row. So I actually have them beating Utah at home, taking care of Cal, and then I have them losing to Washington and losing to Oregon before coming back and winning the battle for Los Angeles at home and beating UCLA. I have them finishing 10-2 overall, 7-2 in the conference, and they are part of a 4-way tie between 4 teams finishing 7-2 in the conference. And if this sounds crazy, it's not. It happened last year. Oregon, USC, Oregon State, and Utah all finishing tied for first. Oregon getting in, being 2-1 against those other 3 teams. And then Utah being 0-2 against those other 3 teams. They would be out of it. And then it would be down between Oregon State and USC, which will go to the 3rd tiebreaker. And the difference will be wins over FBS opponents. Oh, excuse me, that's the 4th tiebreaker. The 3rd tiebreaker is record against common opponents, which they would be completely tied for the entire season. And then you go to FBS win percentage. And unfortunately for Oregon State, they scheduled a game against UC Davis, which is an FCS team, which will knock them out of the Pac-12 title game. That's just how the cookie crumbled.
These are very descriptive prediction here.
How was it?
I spent about an hour trying to figure that out.
That's pretty impressive.
Hey, if it happens, I guess we'll look back at this and laugh.
But yeah, I mean, how crazy is that? Oregon State could potentially not make their conference championship game simply because they scheduled UC Davis instead of Nevada.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's going to be a common theme as playoff expands to 12 teams and other, as conference alignment changes, you're going to see less and less, we'll call it cupcake games, and you're going to see a lot more what Colorado is doing, which is playing, the big boys early, or playing at least competitive talent or equivalent talent early. But anyway, my champion, boring as it is, it's going to be USC as well. Talking about Caleb Williams' health, I think Lincoln Riley is going to put the blinders on Caleb Williams a little bit this year. I think he's going to be like, this is our chance. You can't just be running around and trying to, do it all yourself. You don't need to. I think he's just going to have to. I think you're going to see a more composed Caleb Williams. I think last year, him coming and being the guy for USC essentially. But he had obviously Jordan Addison and some other guys, behind him. But he was like, I'm going to do this all myself. And I think Lincoln Riley is going to be like, you know what? We don't need to do that this year. I think you can just still be just as good or maybe even better not doing that. And I think if he sticks to that, obviously he's going to make game-winning plays. Like, he's going to put his body on the line. But I think health, obviously, as you said, is very important. But I think he's going to put the blinders on him a little bit just to, keep him, because obviously without him, this team is not the same.
He's good enough where he takes a team that's probably – like, he could take this team undefeated if he stays healthy. Like, he's that good.
Absolutely. No, for sure. I really like their wide receiver core again. They bring back everybody, and then they bring in a couple transfers that are really good. Defense, they improved. They brought in, which out of kind of the clouds, bringing in Bear Alexander from Georgia, who was, top 10 recruit in the country. True freshman last year, played in all 12 games for Georgia, and just decided, I don't know, he didn't get jumped on the depth chart. He was going to be the starter at nose tackle for them, and just people not sure if there was quote unquote tampering or anything. They're not sure, but he, he'll be the starting nose tackle for them, and that's a huge pickup for them on the defensive line that struggled last year. And I think,
did you see his apartment on TikTok?
Yeah, that was pretty. Yeah, he's living in. Yeah, we know why, but
I didn't see this. What kind of apartment he got?
We'll send it to you, but it's 4K a month, I think, is what Zillow had it at.
Yeah, it's like downtown LA. It's like in the nicest part of downtown LA. It's like not near USC's campus, because USC's campus is actually kind of in the bad part of LA, or just outside of the bad part of LA. It's
not in a great spot, according to our LA Hokie correspondent, Grayson Wimbish. It's not in a great area of town, but my guess is when you're 300 plus pounds and play defensive tackle,
it don't matter.
Yeah, he won't have any problems, I don't think.
You're going to be okay. All right. Go on, Brett.
I think that's safe to say that they should be the favorite to win this year. But anything can happen in this conference this year. I'm not going to close the book yet.
If you're watching the video or when we clip this, I apologize. I've been terrible with the banners in this podcast. I've been about 5 minutes late on every single segment. It's the preseason for the podcasters too. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we'll be back with that. We'll figure that out.
Guys, freestyle. Give me your facts, your figures, whatever you got. Let's go about 10 minutes freestyle. Whatever little nugget of information you got.
I just want to take a sec to recognize just the quarterback play that's going to be happening in this conference this year. You have Caleb Williams, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Cam Rising, DJ Uiagalelei, Dante Moore possibly. I think there's just so many guys. Like, it's going to be such an exciting season to watch. And I think that there's like 3 possible Heisman candidates in that list I just mentioned, which is pretty insane for the Pac-12, I'd say. Like 3 serious contenders. So I think it's just going to be a really interesting conference to watch. Maybe the most interesting out of any.
I have a crazy long shot pick here. I think Utah is going to be potentially this year's TCU. I think they can really just come out of nowhere and just have like a lightning in a bottle kind of season, where it's just they have a guy exactly like Max Duggan, which is just a guy they can rally behind and just puts his body on the line for everything. Cam Rising right now plus 7,000 in the Heisman favorite. I mean, that is astronomical. I think there's value there. I really do. I think he's got a serious chance just because of his performance in the bowl game last year, and especially in their against USC. I think there's some actual value there with him. And I think there's some value in the Utah playoff line as well, which I think is plus 18, plus 2,000 something, plus something. Let me look.
Well, while you look
at that,
while you look at that, let's talk about some teams I think are really bad. Under 5 wins for Arizona State, I think, is not something that I had on my radar about a month ago. But now that I'm looking at it, I just don't see that team winning more than 5 games. So feel pretty confident in that one. Stanford, we haven't talked about the Cardinal yet. I think they're going to be worse than Colorado. This is a really, really bad Stanford team.
There's a reason we haven't talked about them yet.
There's a reason we haven't talked about them. They're recruiting very well, ironically, but right now they're just really bad. Their over-under on DraftKings is set at 3. I have them going 2-10 this year, so that would be the under. The juice is on the under for that one. It's at minus 160, so I probably wouldn't touch that one. You could get a push with 3, but maybe the most likely upset of the FBS versus FCS upset, they do host Sacramento State. They just grabbed Sacramento State's head coach, but Sacramento State is a very good FCS team. They start the season a Friday night on the islands against Hawaii and Timmy Chang, who's bringing back the run and shoot for the Rainbow Warriors. Right now, Hawaii is plus 10 at home against Stanford. Hawaii is one of the best at home against the spread teams in the country over the past 5 seasons. I don't think Hawaii will win that game. Hawaii is still pretty bad, but plus 10 at home for Hawaii, I'm probably taking that every day of the week.
Yeah.
Especially when they're playing Stanford. So I like Hawaii in that one to cover the spread, not to win. I have Stanford winning that game. They're going to be really bad. Another team that I think is going to be sneaky bad, Cal. We haven't talked about the Cal Golden Bears at all yet. Their win total is set at 5 with the juices on the over for that one at minus 120. I think the under at even 100 is really good there. They have a sneaky tough schedule, I guess you could say. They'll host Auburn in week 2. Ironically, I think they might win that game against Auburn at home. But they start off not an easy one at North Texas. They play Idaho. I could see them like at minimum going 2-1 non-conference, but they have a pretty tough road in the Pac-12. Their offense looked really bad coming out of the spring, like bad enough that the coaches had nothing good to say after spring practice. They lost a lot of talent, lost their quarterback. I think Cal could be a pretty inept offensive team, and in a conference like you said, Dom, with a lot of good quarterback play, it's going to be a pretty rough season for the Golden Bears. I think they're definitely in rebuilding mode. So I like the under 5 on Cal as well if I'm reaching for somebody. And that's who I got for the bad teams.
Yeah, and then Oregon is actually Utah is only plus 1,200 to make the playoff. Still think there's value there, but I was hoping for a little longer odds. I wouldn't put too much on that just because I think the value is not quite there. That obviously could change over the next 4 or 5 weeks. But, I still like Utah as kind of just the crazy team in this conference.
We haven't talked about Washington State either, so I wanted to mention the Cougars. Cam Ward came out of FCS as one of the most exciting transfer portal options. Played pretty well last year. They had a big road win at Wisconsin, but other than that, they kind of fell flat on their face. This is a team that's going to lose a lot. Let me check what they are coming in at on TARP. They are they're kind of middle of the road in TARP. They have not recruited very well. Kind of the bottom of the pack recruiting. They play a mediocre schedule. I was kind of thinking that Washington State would be around a 7-win team, and then I went game by game looking at their schedule. I think they're more like a 5-win team. I don't think you play their over-under, but I just wanted to mention the Cougars. Not a full rebuilding year, maybe a reloading year, and an unfortunate that they have Cam Ward in a year that is going to be pretty tough. They open at Colorado State. Right now, Colorado State is plus 13.5 dogs in that game. I like the Rams in that one. That's going to be a really tough one.
Oh, did I read this correctly? USC was 11-1 against the spread last year.
Yeah, I think so.
This year, I think there's no way that's happening this year. Well, I mean, you can't say that because we don't know the lines, but I don't. 11-1. I mean, I bet them a lot last year, and I do remember winning quite a bit. But 11-1 against the spread is crazy. Back to Washington State. What made me think of that was, weren't they in like probably the craziest, bad beat of all time last year against Oregon? Was that them last year?
Yes, that was the interception at the end of the game.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they were up. They were. They were up. What? It was like, I don't know, 41 to. Well, I'm looking right now. It's like they were up like 41 to 30 something, and then they threw a pick six with 30 seconds left, and lost the spread.
I remember that was crazy.
Yeah, I mean they
gave up 2 scores. They gave up two. They gave up a score. Oregon went and scored, and then they had the ball, and then they threw a pick six, and they lost. Yeah, I don't have much on them besides obviously Cam Ward.
I think they'll pull an upset on someone, but they'll also not. They'll lose some games that they shouldn't. That they should win. I actually have them upsetting Oregon State.
They're a team you're not going to watch all season until that one game where they show up.
Yep, they're going to be they're going to be a big game break team. There's going to be one Saturday where ESPN clocks into their game 4 or 5 times. They
really didn't beat any good teams last year besides Wisconsin. Every team that was actually any good last year, they lost. So,
talking about opening spreads, USC minus 30.5 week 0 against San Jose State. Do we like the Trojans minus 30.5?
Yeah, I mean they're not. I don't think Lincoln Riley ever has let up the gas on a bad team. So
30.5. They also have
600 yards that game.
They also have their lines for some later games. Minus 38 against Nevada.
I have zero clue, but I would probably take that too, honestly. Lincoln Riley is always known for beating a team 65-0.
DraftKings Sportsbook currently has them +1 at Notre Dame for later in the season. Has them as 6.5-point favorites against Utah later in the season. 6-point favorites against Washington.
I think I'd hammer that
6.5 Utah is.
I think I'd hammer that Notre Dame line right now.
Yeah.
I mean, even at Notre Dame.
I mean, I know I love me some Sam Hartman, but a lot of questions on Notre Dame. +2 at Oregon currently, and then 12-point favorites against UCLA. So if you want to bet the spread for most of USC's games, you can do that right now in the DraftKings Sportsbook. If you are so inclined, you just can't wait. All right, guys. Any other fun tidbits? Just a couple really quick hitters. According to ESPN's FPI, which I have some slight mathematical problems with, but for the most part, preseason does a decent job. Utah has the toughest strength of schedule. Oregon State, the easiest strength of schedule. According to TARP, which we've talked about, Washington is returning the most at the conference and in the country. In fact, the Pac-12 has 3 of the top 12, 4 of the top 13 in TARP, with Washington, Oregon, Utah, and Southern California. Stanford and Colorado are the bottom of that one. And in terms of recruiting over the past 2 years, that has been Southern California and Oregon, and California, Los Angeles are the top 3 in that category, with Cal, Arizona State, and Washington State the bottom 3 recruiters of the conference. Any other fun tidbits? Pac-12 should be a wild season. Please, I beg of you, drink an extra cup of coffee. You know how they say mix in a water with your beers? Maybe mix in an iced coffee this fall so you can stay up to watch some Pac-12 after dark. It will be worth it.
It will be worth it.
It will be worth it.
Sure.
Who do we have? Who are we doing next week? What conference we got next week?
Well, we're going East to West. So we're going Big 12, right? I mean, West to East.
Yeah, so we're going Big 12, which is another wild conference.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's like the same thing except less good teams.
Sounds like a very sounds like a conference very near and dear to our heart.
Yeah, and just a more mediocrity.
Yep. All right. Well, that'll be a fun one too. I mean, I have a lot of hot Texas takes, so I'm really excited for the Big 12 one. That'll be coming out next week. Be sure to hit up our TikTok at Locks of Saturday. You can use our code when you sign up on the Prize Picks app. Use Locks of Sat. That is LOCKSOFSAT. All caps. When you sign up on Prize Picks, they will match your first deposit up to $100. So you put in $50, they're going to give you $50 in free bets. That equals $100 in daily fantasy.
How can you pass that up?
Can't pass it up. Use the code Locks of Sat on the Prize Picks app when you sign up. State doesn't have sports betting. That's okay. Prize Picks is daily fantasy. Pretty sure Prize Picks is available in your state. That'll do it for us for the Locks of Saturday. Our friend Robert isn't on the show. So, Dom, you want to do the honors?
Peace out.